Hello, welcome to Living Arts. I'm your host, Jackie Suarez. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight we're going to be speaking with the Executive Director of the Katonah Museum of Art, Darsie Alexander. Hello, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. You know, I'm so glad that you came down to speak to us. I've always been a big fan of the museum, and I wanted to just give our audience a little bit more information about it and also the programs you have and things that are going to be coming up. So why don't you start by just giving us a brief history of the museum and kind of your mission?
Well, the museum, even though it's in a very modern building in Katonah, it was actually founded over 60 years ago, and it was founded by some kind of renegade women who wanted to bring more arts and culture to the Katonah area, which is, as you probably know, it's about 50 minutes north of the city, right on one of the Metro North lines. And they set up shop in a library and started to do their own exhibitions, really great first-time shows of some pretty big-name artists. They tell a lot of stories of driving into the Met to borrow loans in their station wagons and throwing open the back hatch and loading in a Picasso or a Morris Louis painting. So there's some great lore related to the museum. And then over the years, the institution outgrew its space in the local gallery. And several of the board members got together and said, hey, look, we need to hire a great architect to do a building for us. And so in 1990, the women and some of their partners hired Edward Larrabee Barnes, who's really considered one of the great American museum architects, who happened to live in Mount Kisco to do the building conveniently. And there are all kinds of stories like that, just about the relationships that undergirded the founding of this institution. So he made a very beautiful, open, glass-enclosed building on the other side of Route 684, which is where we have our gallery spaces now. And as far as the mission goes, it's always been a very diverse mission. It's really celebrated artists from all different time periods and practices, and I think particularly strong in 19th and 20th century art. So that's where we'll continue to grow our program and our constituencies.
Well, you know, I've been there several times. It's in a beautiful space. You know, if anyone who hasn't been there, you know, I strongly suggest you go. And I know at various times in the year you have different exhibitions. So how does that work? I think it's maybe like 3 or 4 different times of the year.
That's right. And right now we have a particularly fun art installation in the back of the museum. So if you go into the museum and you walk all the way back through to the sculpture garden, we have a giant house that's been constructed in our garden with the trees puncturing through the different layers of the house and through the ceiling. So it's a big, almost like a big stage out there. So when we do our concerts with Caramoor, which is a collaborative relationship with Caramoor Center for the Arts up the street, we use that space. So there are ongoing installations like that are on our campus that people can come and enjoy even when we're closed. And then there's a rotating cycle of exhibitions. So we usually do 4 to 5 exhibitions a year, and they flip over every 2 to 3 months. So that's sort of the normal cycle of, you know, museum runs.
So who, I guess, do you have on tap coming up? Because I know you've been closed. So who would be the next, or what's the next exhibition?
Well, we were talking earlier about how museums like the KMA have to close because we have to empty out our spaces of the last show and clean the galleries and repaint them so that every time people come it looks totally different. And we're in the process of doing that now. And we have a couple of great shows coming up. The first one is an exhibition which opens on July 12th, which features the work of an artist named Emily Clark. And Emily makes works out of her dinner leftovers, in effect. So you go into the gallery space and you see what looks like a large dining room table, except instead of, you know, neatly placed utensils and entrees, she has stacks of eggshells and rinds from lemons and oranges, all in these beautiful piles and arrangements. So her work is really about taking what she lives with every day in her life and transforming it into something that can be viewed as a sculptural object. So her work is on view through the summer. And then we have an exhibition coming up of work by self-taught artists. And that's a very interesting category.
Well, going back to Ms. Clark's work, isn't the delicacy of decomposition part of a larger program?
Yes, there's There's a collective of museums, a Fairfield Westchester collector of museums who often will partner around certain themes so that people in the community can go from one institution to the next to see how that theme is made manifest in different ways. So the theme here is the 7 deadly sins, and each museum picked a different sin, and we picked gluttony. So the idea of eating and food excess is all part of the theme of her work, so it seemed to tie in really well with the overall concept of the shows.
Okay, now just I guess on a practical standpoint, I mean, she's not got anything on there that is actually decomposing, obviously, because it's going to be on display for a while. So
No, actually, pretty much everything decomposes. I mean, it's all material that degrades and falls apart and ages. And I think that's one of the really interesting things about artists today is they're not necessarily making paintings that they want to stick on a wall and last forever. They really understand that their artwork is part of a natural ebb and flow of life. So sometimes they really embrace the transience and the decomposition of their artworks, because art is part of life and life changes and evolves. And so that's kind of the philosophy that she's taken about her work.
has she always kind of worked along those lines or with that theme?
Yeah, this has been a recent development with her. She's someone who has done a lot of research into 19th century botany and herbs and some very interesting histories from the past that then inspire her contemporary work. So I'd say this effort is part of a larger series of works that she's done over the past few years. So it's great to see it evolve.
No, absolutely. And the 7 deadly sins. Wow. What made you choose gluttony?
I can't take responsibility for that, I'm afraid, although it is a great sin to pick. I've only been at the KMA for about a year, so some of this stuff was in the pipeline before I arrived, but it was a great topic and one I love and can't wait to see the other shows.
Absolutely. So then if they were to go to, I guess, your website, you'll be able to see the other museums and see the other...
Yes, there are links to the other museums and what they're doing in the area.
Okay, so you can see the other sins as well.
Oh, yes.
So you have something exciting coming up on July 19th. It's called Inside the Outside. So tell us about that.
Well, Inside the Outside is an exhibition that looks at the work of what we call self-taught artists. And these are artists that do not go through a formal training. They don't go to MFA schools. They don't go to painting academies. These are individuals who really taught themselves.
And it was intentional, not to interrupt you, but it was intentional. They decided they weren't going to seek a formal education.
You know, sometimes it wasn't intentional. Sometimes, in some cases, these artists couldn't afford to go to school, or they didn't have other assets that they would need to pursue a formal education. The 5 artists that are in this show really made work coming out of their imagination and their own worldview. And many of them were from the Deep South, many coming from less fortunate conditions than other artists that we see in other gallery spaces and museums. So their work is very, very personal. It often is intensely psychological and amazingly beautiful and skilled, but really kind of considered outsider insofar as these artists never really conformed to the mainstream. They weren't interested in conceptualism in the 60s or abstract expressionism in the 50s. They sort of followed their own motivations and their own vision, and it's just an amazing array of work. 5 different artists shown in great depth, so we're really excited about that show.
And who are the artists that are going to be featured?
Thornton Dial is one, James Castle, Bill Traylor, Nellie Mae Rowe, and Willie Young. So it's a blend of artists, and it's a great opportunity for us to connect with other organizations like the Harlem Children's Zone and other institutions that are interested also in Black America and the history of the Deep South, and so there's some nice tie-ins there with other projects.
Now, I believe I saw something about the artists in question not necessarily being young artists. Is that true? I mean, not to say that they're older, but they came to start, painting or doing what they're doing later in life.
Very much so, yes. Okay. One of the artists really didn't become a serious artist until he was in his 80s.
Oh my,
so it's an amazing story. Yeah, and the personal stories of some of these artists are really extraordinary. Some were really, working in, shops, shoe shine businesses, and really just out of their own desperate need to create. And I think that's, that's what's so compelling about this exhibition. These are not Sunday painters. These are people who made their artwork to survive. Art being an expression of a deep and intense feeling in themselves. And those feelings come at different stages of life. And so you can still be amazingly inventive and creative well into your 80s and beyond. And these artists really show that.
That's amazing. I've met so many artists here in Peekskill that are retired, or for whatever the reason they're just now starting to paint or do whatever art they're doing. It's because now they have more time to do it.
Right.
So it's always great to see what they're up to. Now this is a part, I guess maybe I misunderstood this from the website, but all of this is a part of someone's collection.
Yes,
right?
It is. It's the collection of William Louis Dreyfus, who also lives in Mount Kisco. So that's one of the things that I've done since coming to Westchester and to the Katona Museum is to really look at where is the great art in this community. We have a artist association, the Katona Museum of Art Artists Association, and so I'm very interested in not only expanding the ideas and the image of the museum out beyond Westchester, but also really taking advantage of the great wealth of resources right in our own backyard. And he has an exquisite collection of this work. He has a lot of other things as well, but he has always really specialized in the work of self-taught artists.
Wow, very interesting. So that's the title of it. It's Inside the Outside, 5 Self-Taught Artists. Now it'll be running between July 19th and I guess into the fall.
Into October, that's right.
Into October. So what can someone expect to find when they come in? Is some of it going to be outside of the museum, or will all be featured inside? Because I know you've been closed for a bit to kind of accommodate this. So tell me what's been going on inside the museum.
Well, right now, what's going on inside the museum?
Carpenters running around, right?
Well, that's this is maybe TMI, but when you turn over an exhibition, the place gets very, very dirty, and there's a lot of dust that kicks up everywhere. And we've got some old carpeting that we're ripping up and polishing the floors and really getting it ready for this show. The works themselves. Because a lot of these artists were just making artwork at their dining room table or their kitchen, it tends to be small. It's very intimate, often drawings.
Okay.
So it's largely paintings and drawings that are going to be in this exhibition. The show that opens after that, which is called Supra Environmental, and that opens in late October, that looks at the relationship of art to the environment. So there are sculptures made out of recycled plastic bottles, and one installation of one artist is a giant sculpture of a tree kind of is falling off the wall. So it's very dimensional, it's very sculptural. This show that is the self-taught artist show is more of the painting and drawing genre.
That's awesome. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I will definitely try and catch, I guess the Delicacy of Decomposition will be up for a while as well, right?
That's right. So that Emily Clark show that we talked about a moment ago is going to be up through the summer, and then the Self-Taught Artist show will be up through the early part of October. That's a great lineup.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Are you going to have a grand opening kind of around the 19th, or?
We're going to have a grand opening, and we're really taking advantage of the events that we do at the museum. People are so busy now, and there's so much going on in their lives that when they come to a museum, they want to have a really special experience. So we pay attention not only to kind of what we're putting on our walls, but also then what's happening on the campus. What are other activities that people can do when they come to the museum? We have a learning center which activates a space for children where they can come and make stuff. We have a lounge in the space, and are really thinking about bringing music and other art forms into the organization so that it's more than just a set of galleries. It's really a whole environment that people can experience from start to finish. Someone has even suggested that we make art installations in the bathrooms, which I think is a great idea. And
that would be cute.
Maybe undertake that at some point in the future. So this opening will be a very fun event and really a celebration of these shows.
So that's so tell me about your relationship with the Caramoor.
Well, the Caramoor is right up the street, as you know, and they have a wonderful music program that really runs the gamut from chamber music to Patti LuPone and other sort of better known names. And we've collaborated with them for a number of years on a collaboration that happens at the KMA that includes jazz and folk, and in fact we have a concert coming up on August 5th, which is a Wednesday night starting at 6:30, which is a Harlem chamber music. And it's in our garden, and we've had incredible luck with the weather. You can come and set up a picnic and get some wine and bring some friends and just hang out on a beautiful summer evening and listen to music. It is a ton of fun.
So how many more, I guess, how many concerts do they have normally, or what's like the frequency of it?
They tend to be about 3 a summer. So we have one on the 15th of July, and then the next one will be August 5th, and we had one back in June. And each one is a little bit different. So it's a nice blend, and I think people really enjoy it.
Awesome. So are they using you more as kind of a performance space, as opposed to, I mean, how much of the actual, organization of the concerts are you involved in?
We sit down and we say, more or less, we might like to focus on this a little bit more this summer. We have, because of our exhibition schedule, that we'll sometimes suggest certain themes that maybe it's a little folksy one year, maybe it's a little more classical another year, depending on what we have up in the gallery. So there's always a little bit of a conversation back and forth, and they really take the reins in terms of finding the talent, booking the talent, and we do the logistics on site.
Okay. I'd like to speak to you more about, I guess, your community projects. I know that you have so much going on, and your outreach is awesome. So I guess we'll start with the schools. I mean, the school's out now, but what do you normally have going on with the local schools, and what can they do at the museum?
A lot. We have really
like a tour and
outstanding kids programs. I guess they fall into a variety of different categories. One category is more of the outreach category, where we're working with schools and some underserved communities in Westchester, really bringing kids and their families in for art projects that both teach kids visual literacy, but also give them a lot of communication skills and social skills. Again, working with their parents on different art projects, and that again has been very much of a partnership with some of the local schools like the Park School and others in the area that have been just great friends of the institution. And then we have a program for burgeoning poets and writers that is called Thinking Through Art, that really gives kids an opportunity to put words to their visual impressions. They get up and they write poems and they read them, and again, it's not just our programs. I think what makes them so special is that it's not just about kind of making a drawing. We create programs where kids are really engaged not only with the surface of what an artwork looks like, but the questions that go into the creation of an artwork. And sometimes that results in fostering skills around speech and communication and self-expression and interpretation, as well as, of course, drawing and creating. So we've got a lot of programs that are really particularly outstanding for kids. And in fact, we have some programs coming up this summer for those moms that want to get out of the house and send their kids off on a Wednesday morning. We've got some activity projects and sort of mini camps on Wednesdays in the next couple of weeks where kids can come in for the day and do some fun stuff. So I'm really proud of the programs that we have at the KMA for children.
Okay, so I guess if you wanted to have your child participate in that, is it kind of like a drop-in type thing, or did you need to register prior?
You know what? There's someone back at the museum who would kill me for saying this, but I think you probably could drop in if you wanted to. We prefer to have people register in advance because these programs tend to fill up pretty quickly. You get into August, just as you and I were talking earlier, and moms are like, what am I going to do with my kid? It's like the summer is nearing its end, and those last final weeks sometimes can seem really, really, really long. So we have some outlets for the kids and their parents. Yeah, exactly right.
So I guess, if you're an educator as well, you could reach out to the museum and you can arrange to have your class go there. And who would they speak to if they wanted to do something like that?
You just call the main line, and that's the phone number is 914-232-9555. And anyone can call in and they can be directed to the scheduler for those programs.
Okay, so as I guess a lot of people that maybe have not been to the museum, what would you say to them as far as this is someplace you really want to check out? There's things here that you need to see. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say that this is an institution that is really special because it's very intimate. It's not like going to MoMA or the Met, which are wonderful institutions and places where I've worked over the years. It's a place where you really can have a one-on-one experience with the artwork. And I think the kinds of shows that we're doing and the way that we're thinking about the artistic program really will bring our communities in greater contact with artists. We think artists are essential in terms of giving us a different perspective on the world. It's a very unique organization that's an easy trip. It's a very manageable date or an afternoon. And I think really exposes in a very manageable and intimate way some deep connections to art and artists, and that's just a very significant part of our mission, and it always will be.
I've got that feeling when I went to the museum. There's just it's just a lovely experience, and it's in a great place.
It is.
You mentioned that you have an artist association, so I'm thinking of it as terms of you maybe have some young artists that meet there or they're interning there. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, the Artist Association is comprised of artists that live in the Westchester area, and they meet regularly and they show, not always at the museum, but sometimes at the museum. It's kind of a feedback loop. When you're an artist, particularly when you're not in an urban center, we all, or many of us create in relative isolation, and that's
true.
If you're imagining sort of making a painting or something like that, and so a lot of these artists really crave having a dialogue about their work and showing it to people and getting feedback and bringing it into a curator, and so that's really what we provide is we give them a platform to exchange ideas and to work together and to show together. So it's been a very, very successful membership program that the KMA offers.
Well, that's awesome. So you say membership. So I'm thinking maybe, are you choosing like kind of an artist in residence, or is it something that you have to be chosen to be a part of the group? Or
Nope. You just have to be a museum member to be part of the KMAA. That's sort of what I meant. And some of these people are professional artists doing it all their lives, and some, as we were saying earlier in the evening, are making work and just learning these skills later on after they finish their business careers or their professional careers. So it's a great mix of people.
That is true. I guess, looking at larger social issues, do you ever have a sense that maybe you wanted to make some of the exhibitions come in line with some of the things that are happening in the news, so to speak?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the two shows that we're doing this coming year, back to back, came about because when I moved here, as I said, I'm a relatively recent transplant. I came from Minneapolis. Unfortunately, I didn't bring good weather with me. I brought very bad weather. If you're thinking about that, the snow was so horrible this year. But one of the first things I noticed that was so strong about Westchester is the sense about the environment. And you mentioned the natural beauty of this area, and it's amazing it's so close to New York. I couldn't believe that it was 45 minutes out of Grand Central and I was in a different world. And so it really struck me that this was a place that really cared about the environment, that people had a lot of animals and often very busy lives. I mean, commuters into the city, but they really, when they came home in the evenings on the weekends, really loved being in this space. And there are all of these great organizations like Bedford 2020 and the Audubon Society and Westchester Land Trust, and caring for the land and preserving it. So the two shows that we did really responded to that. The first one that I mentioned is about the environment, and that show opens in October and it runs through January. And then the next show deals with animal life and animal ethics. So they're very tailored to the issues that we're thinking about today, whether or not it's global warming and the effect that it has on plant life, or you know, how we dispose of our waste, you know, vis-a-vis Emily Clark and some of the artists in the Super Environmental Show. So absolutely, I think it's essential for museums and art institutions to be responding to what we're seeing in the news.
Right, because sometimes you just see this disconnect. If you go into a place, it's almost like the art is static, as opposed to maybe having some connections to things that are happening currently, or even to just modern society.
Well, it depends. I mean,
where you go.
If,
I mean,
yeah,
or
I mean, if you
what you're
go
looking at.
if you go into the Met and you see a great Manet painting, for instance, like a great French Impressionist painter, you may think that those paintings are disconnected somehow. But actually, they're very, very connected, just not to our own time. So for us to look at one of his paintings and understand that it was a commentary on, let's say, class or various social inequities, we wouldn't necessarily recognize the cues that would help us understand the painting in that way. We just think of it as an Impressionist painting, and it looks kind of old, maybe. You know, art is, even the most abstract art, is always a response to its environment. Whether or not that environment is a certain thing that happened in an artist's life that makes the work deeply personal, or a political event that's happening in culture at large. And sometimes it's easier to recognize when there's that connection than it is in other cases. What institutions like the KMA strive to do is to make that bridge between, you know, what you're seeing in the gallery space and what you're experiencing in the outside world. So that's where institutions and curators help to make that connection, because sometimes it's not obvious to people, and that's where we can help.
Absolutely. You know, just, you know, having my niece, I took her out to the Museum of Natural History yesterday, and we had a great time.
It's such a beautiful museum.
Right, exactly. But I was like really trying to get her into just reading some of the stuff, and like, you know, as opposed to just kind of walking through and, you know, not making, you know, it's not as engaging maybe as it should be in some areas.
Well, also the way we look has changed. We don't look the same way. And there's actually a lot of interesting evidence that the amount of time that people spend in front of an artwork when they're at museums, it's gone down over the years. And part of that is, you know, we're so used to instant browsing and instant recognition and moving through things very quickly that
our attention span is not what it should be.
Our attention span is lessened. So you'll see that museums, many of them are experimenting with ways to hold people's attention a little bit longer. And that often will mean the introduction of technology in some way. So, you know, it's not surprising to hear that your niece is going through there and feeling like, you know, where's the next thing? Because her generation is accustomed to viewing and receiving information very quickly. Exactly. Whereas I can go and stand in front of something and, you know, just sort of sit there and look at it and
take a little,
you know, then
time.
Go back to it. You know, it's different.
Well, I'm looking forward to bringing her to, you know, the KMA and all the exhibitions you have coming up. I want to thank you for coming. You know, we've run out of time. So if you could just give our audience a way to, I guess, reach the information desk or your website.
Absolutely. So the number again for the museum is 914-232-9555. And it's just KatonaMuseum.org. It's easy to find. There are no other Katona museums anywhere, I'm happy to say.
Well, thank you for coming.
Great to be here.
It is a great museum. I strongly suggest you go there. I enjoyed my visit there, and I'm going to be going back. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you again soon. Peace.
Thank you.